Okay, so when I say psychoanalysis, what's the first thing that pops into your head? It's probably a patient on a couch, right? And a silent, detached analyst just taking notes. For decades, that was pretty much the standard image. But then, in the late 20th century, something really revolutionary started bubbling up under the surface. It was this massive shift in thinking that didn't just change therapy, it changed our whole understanding of what it means to be human. So, let's get into it.
And at the heart of this whole revolution is one single, powerful question. Are we really just driven by these deep, hidden biological instincts, sex and aggression, like Freud originally thought? Or is our entire psychology, from the very beginning, built on a much more fundamental need, the need to connect with other people? This is the core conflict that basically split the psychoanalytic world right down the middle.
Now, to really get why this change was such a huge deal, we have to start with the old way of thinking, a world defined by what's now called a one-person psychology, where the ideal analyst was basically a blank screen.
Yeah, in the traditional Freudian view, the analyst's job was to be completely objective, almost invisible, a blank screen. The idea was that their own personality, their feelings, their reactions, all of that was just noise, contamination that got in the way of the real work. The only thing that mattered was the patient's isolated internal mind. It's like the analyst was the scientist in a lab coat and the patient's mind was the specimen under the microscope.
And this right here, this really breaks it down. On the left, you've got that one-person model. All the focus is on what's going on inside the patient's head. But what if that's only half the story? The two-person model on the right throws a wrench in all that. It says, hey, you can't possibly understand one person in the room without also understanding the other person and, crucially, what's happening between them.
So how did we get from a one-person to a two-person game? Well, it didn't happen overnight. It was this gradual buildup of different voices that eventually led to what analysts call the relational turn.
You can kind of see the breadcrumbs here. Way back, you had thinkers like Harry Stack Sullivan and W.R.D. Fairbairn who were already saying, hey, maybe our primary motivation isn't drives. Maybe it's the search for relationships. Then, bam, 1983, Stephen Mitchell and Jay Greenberg come along, and they just blow the doors wide open. They officially put a name on it, the paradigm conflict between the old drive model and this new relational one. And by the 90s, the idea had totally caught fire, and the relational turn was a full-blown movement.
Okay, so what are the big ideas at the heart of this new way of thinking? It really comes down to a few key concepts that just completely change the game.
First up, this idea of mutual influence. This is huge. The therapy room is no longer a one-way street. It's a living, breathing system where two people are constantly and often subtly shaping each other's experience. The patient's mood affects the analyst, and the analyst's tiniest reaction, a raised eyebrow, a shift in tone, affects the patient. The whole thing is something they are co-creating, together, in real time.
And that leads us to this next idea, intersubjectivity. Now, this sounds a little academic, but the idea is actually pretty simple and profound. The patient is no longer an object to be studied. Instead, you have two subjects in the room, two separate minds, each with its own rich history, its own feelings, its own unique point of view. The goal isn't just for the analyst to figure out the patient, but for both of them to come to recognize and really see each other as distinct, separate people. And wow, this quote from the relational theorist Jessica Benjamin just nails it. The goal is creating a space where each person experiences the other as another mind who can be felt with. It's not about analyzing from a distance, it's about connecting on a deeply human level. So powerful.
And the last big piece of the puzzle here is the co-construction of meaning. See, insight isn't some ancient artifact the analyst digs up and presents to the patient. Like, aha, here is the truth. Nope. Instead, meaning and understanding are things that are built together, through conversation. An interpretation is more like a hypothesis, something the analyst offers up to be explored and negotiated in the dialogue. Does this feel true to you, right here, with me, right now? That's the question.
This all sounds fascinating in theory, right? But what does it actually change about therapy itself? How does a relational session actually look and feel different from a classical one?
This table just lays it all out so clearly. Look at the massive shift in stance, from being this neutral, distant observer to being an authentic and engaged participant. They're often described as more personable, more humane. And check this out, countertransference, the analyst's own feelings. That's no longer seen as some kind of professional failure. It's valuable data. It's information about what's happening in the relationship. And transference isn't just the patient replaying the past, it's a living dynamic that's being actively co-created by both people, right there in the here and now.
And that leads to probably the single most important practical takeaway. In relational psychoanalysis, all the techniques, all the clever interpretations, they're all secondary. They're all in service of one thing, the relationship itself. It's the real, lived, authentic connection between the therapist and the patient that becomes the primary engine of healing and change.
A perfect example of this in action is the whole concept of rupture and repair. Look, misunderstandings and conflicts are going to happen in any real relationship, and that includes therapy. But instead of seeing these ruptures as failures, the relational approach sees them as incredible opportunities. By actually acknowledging the mistake or the misunderstanding and working through it together, the therapist and patient can repair their bond. And that process right there is profoundly therapeutic. It creates a new, more resilient connection, and it shows the patient that, hey, a relationship can actually survive a conflict and come out stronger on the other side. That's a huge lesson.
Okay, so let's zoom out. Why is this whole thing, this shift from a one-person to a two-person psychology, why is it such a big deal? Well, because it totally redefines what we believe makes us tick as human beings.
The old school drive theory basically said we're just these bundles of instincts, and our main motivation is to let off steam. But relational theory tells a completely different and I think much more compelling story. It says that our most fundamental organizing motivation, from the moment we are born until the day we die, is the need to form and maintain connections with others. We are, at our very core, hardwired for relationship.
And this quote from Stephen Mitchell, one of the founders of the whole movement, just sums it up so beautifully. The central human struggle isn't just about taming our inner beasts, it's about navigating this constant push and pull between our deep, powerful need for connection and our equally powerful fear of the pain and vulnerability that relationships inevitably bring.
So, this leaves us with a really powerful thought to take with you. The relational model tells us we are never just passive recipients in our lives. We are always active co-creators of our reality. So, what if we took that idea and applied it to our own lives? What if every conversation, every argument, every moment of connection is something we are actively building with the other person? How does that change the way we see ourselves and our role in every single relationship we have?